everyone. My name is Kaylee Perez. I am a Refugee Sponsorship Associate at MCC Ontario. Thank you all so much for being here today. It is truly an honor to be in this work at this time. We are working with an incredible amount of response from the Canadian public just wanting to do something. And so thank you all for being here, for being willing to take a step and actively respond to this crisis in this way. So many of you are in this room because you have contacted me or my colleague Moses about wanting to sponsor a specific person or family member that you know. MCC is a sponsorship agreement holder, and so it is our role to connect sponsorship groups to refugee profiles available for sponsorship. And prior to September, just to kind of give you a little bit of a picture of the volume that we're dealing with currently, last year MCC worked with 8 sponsorship groups to sponsor 56 refugees. And this year, from September alone, we are already working with over 120 groups. And so it's an incredible response, as I said earlier. But today's meeting has been put together thanks to 3 immigration consultants that we have here with us today. They approached MCC and said, how can we help? We want to be able to do something. And so due to the increased volume, MCC is currently focusing on the BVOR program, the Blended Visa Office Referral Program. And so most of you in here today are interested in learning about named sponsorship, so sponsoring a specific person or family group that you know of. And that is what we call named sponsorship or full sponsorship. And MCC in January will be reevaluating its capacity to take on those cases. But frankly, we are currently focusing on the BVOR program and are overwhelmed. And so it is our hope that today's session will give you the information necessary for you to be able to move forward without the use of MCCS SAW. And so we have Chris Daw with us here today, Aileen Farrell, and Donald Igbokwe, who will be sharing with you practical steps on how to proceed with a named sponsorship, and they'll be able to give you a little bit more information about that. So Aileen, I believe, will be getting us started, and thank you all again for being here.
Kaylee, could I ask a question first before we get started? Will you be talking at all about the other types of sponsorship?
Today is focused on
Thanks, Kaylee. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Group of 5 and community sponsorship, which are specific to, as Kaylee said, named refugee applications, which means you already know who you are going to be sponsoring. Just a little bit of background on who we are. Chris, Donald, and I are regulated Canadian immigration consultants, which means that we are licensed to provide immigration services, quite similar to immigration lawyers, with the exception of representation in federal court. So we are very much experienced. I just want to give you a little bit of background on who will be speaking today. Donald Igbokwe has been well, I asked him for a bio and he gave me 2 pages, but I'm not going to read 2 pages, but I will say that he's been involved in immigration for over 33, or service to humanity for over 33 years. He has, he's offered his services and his time pretty much across the board, including being a chairperson of Durham Region Multi-Faith World Religion Day. In particular, he's just returned from a trip in Jordan, where he was in a team of 8 assisting refugees with their applications on site. And this was through the Archdiocese of Toronto, which was not paid by the Archdiocese. They were paid by those 8 people themselves. And so this is just an example of his benevolent expression in society. Chris Daw, he has been, he got involved with refugees in 1996 as a volunteer for settlement of refugees from Bosnia. And he studied here at Wilfrid Laurier. And ever since 2007, he's been practicing in immigration. I have been practicing in immigration since 1999. And all three of us have been very experienced and quite active in immigration conferences to the public, to our peers, and dealing with department heads, so different immigration offices throughout Canada. I just wanted to go through the objectives. Hi. The objectives today, the agenda today will cover several things. We'll be talking about the objectives of the presentation. We'll talk about the acronyms, because there are many, many acronyms involved with immigration, so you'll have to understand that. Then we'll get into the actual Group of Five and community sponsorship, which Donald will be describing. We'll discuss how you can help, or how possibly others can help you. It depends on what side of the sponsorship you're coming from. Sponsorship needs a team, so we'll talk about what it takes to build a team and to maintain a team. And the application process itself, we will go through step by step. The documentation and the application forms required are often it could be quite the hurdle to overcome if there are delays or refusals. So Chris Daw will be speaking about that. Then, number 8 is what to do once they arrive. So there are many different levels and different committees in your sponsorship team that will have your own roles and responsibilities. So we'll discuss that as well. We'll talk a little bit about what is going on with the federal government, the news, the timelines, and then we'll be open up to questions. And we do ask that you hold your questions until the end, because we have an awful lot of material to go through, and we'd like to be able to allow as much time for questions as possible. So the objectives, why are we here? As Kelly just announced, MCC really is overwhelmed. I can't imagine, there must be how many calls a day? Hundreds, and not including the emails, just saying, I want to get involved, what can I do? Well, it's such an open-ended question, so hopefully you'll be able to understand what exactly you can do from this session. Awareness. Many people want to be involved, but they don't know how. And we are here to help you understand what the steps are required. And for those of you who are here who want to help, there are different ways to help. So the more you understand what it takes, the more you can fit yourself into that role and identify where you can. So as I said earlier, the questions please hold till the end, because in this particular presentation, we're covering the entire gamut of sponsorship, and we will be able to answer all your questions at that time. The acronyms. There are many. G5, Group of Five. You may want to even use your phone and take a picture of this if you want. But if we get to the questions and we start just blurting out acronyms, you don't know what we're talking about, we'll bring it back to this screen, okay? UNHCR is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. CIC, Citizenship and Immigration Canada. PSR, Private Sponsorship of Refugees Program. RG, Resettlement Group. IDP, Internally Displaced Persons. CPOW, or known as CPOW, Central Processing Office in Winnipeg. A PR is a permanent resident. IFH is the Interim Federal Health. CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and CBSA, Canada Border Services Agency. You don't have to memorize it, and we will not test you. Okay, so what we will talk about and what we will not talk about. The SAH is a sponsorship agreement holder, and one of the programs is a blended visa office referral program, the BVOR, which Kelly spoke about earlier. This is what MCC is doing currently. They are a registered SAH, and under the SAH and BVOR programs, on the left you'll see in blue, your financial ability is proven by by providing your funds up front. So you give the money to the SAH, as opposed to these options here, G5 and community sponsorship. You must show your own financial ability. This is individual. This is not through another organization. B, one team lead signature is required through an SAH. Under the G5 and community sponsorship, each sponsor must sign their own forms. They must complete their forms. They must provide all financial documentation. C, you will receive a tax receipt as a charitable donation when you go through an SAH. When you do this privately through a group of 5 and community sponsorship, you receive no tax receipt. And the last one, as you all know, you will be matched with a refugee family if you go through an SAH, and for those in this room, you already know who that family is. Okay, so I will ask Donald to come up. Let me get my laptop. Here, I'll get my laptop.
Thank you. Okay. Yep, sure, thank you. Thank you very much, Eileen. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here today. I believe that perhaps we all know we want to help, and we want to know how we can help. I believe, or we believe, that it's also important for us to know what is involved and how will anyone who we want to help qualify to be eligible to be helped. So it starts with a definition of a refugee. Who is a refugee? A refugee is a person or a group of persons whose life will be at risk upon return to his or her country of origin or habitual residence, and who has no other durable solution in the country of asylum. Mark the word, it says durable solution. So this is where, when we begin to talk about how does one qualify, we'll have to say, based on CIC criteria, there are two. One is UNCR, United Nations for, that Eileen has spoken about. The other criteria is that of Canada, that looks at certain core things, which is eligibility, admissibility, and adaptability. Now, while we are talking about refugee, there is also another group of, we can call them refugees too, who will not be qualified to be sponsored. They are known as internally displaced persons. These are a group of people who are affected by war or, massive violation of human rights, and they were uprooted from their place of residence and, somewhere else, and now moved somewhere else in their country instead of their own particular city or home or something like that. They are called internally displaced people. These people do not qualify for sponsorship under the overseas sponsorship program. Now, when we talk about eligibility, based on that definition, this has to deal with somebody who has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of this, a second definition that UNCR has uses in order to make a determination. It talks about somebody who has a well-founded fear of persecution due to several factors. One of them involves that of race, religion, political opinion, membership of a particular class, and so forth and so on. Moving on. In order to be eligible, you have to meet this criteria. Upon meeting that criteria, you also have to be able to be admissible to Canada. What do we call admissibility? Admissibility has to deal with that upon Canada, government of Canada has to ensure that you do not have any criminal convictions, pose any safety issues to Canadians or medical or become inadmissible due to medical conditions, reasons. Adaptability deals with those people who have to be resettled. Canada also considers, will they be able to integrate into Canada when they arrive into Canada? Part of that integration process involves or includes the ability to be able to communicate with Canadians, ability to be able to find and maintain employment, ability to be able to, completely immerse oneself with the society or the village or the city they are in. Okay, so this is one part of the definition. Second part, we are talking about now classes of asylum, which is what is called, classes of refugee. One is asylum class, and asylum class again happens to be the people perhaps you may be interested in, people who are now outside their country of origin or habitual residence, as well as they are not in Canada. If they are in Canada, they do not fit in this class, and they cannot be sponsored under this class. They have to be seriously affected by war, gross violation of human rights, or civil armed conflict. In order for you to sponsor somebody under this class, that person must have been screened and approved by UNHCR and then referred to Canada, either through the visa missions for resettlement purposes. When these individuals are referred to Canada for resettlement purposes, then Canada would then look for ways of placing them, either through the SAR or through Group of Fives or through community sponsorship. Now, in Group of Five, people also who you have identified or named fall in under this category, they also have to be screened and approved by UNHCR to meet the requirement of being considered by the Canadian government. So when we talk about this particular category, really is come under the broad umbrella of what is called a private refugee sponsorship program. So whether it's a Group of Five, community sponsorship, or people who are resettled through sponsorship agreement holders, they all fall under one category. Convention class. Convention class is another class of refugees. Again, this is a United Nations definition. I have alluded to it before. Someone who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular class or social group, is unable to return to, or owing to that fear is unwilling to avail themselves of the protection of their country or place of habitual residence. Again, qualifications and screenings, these determinations are made by UNHCR for somebody to qualify under this class. Who can be a sponsor? I believe this is now where we are now trying to address directly the reason why you are here. So Kelly started with introduction that the PSR program comprises of a SAR, a Group of Five, and community sponsorship. We are not here today to talk about SAR. We are here to talk about how exactly you can become a part of this process. And that is through one of these two, which is a Group of Five individuals who are permanent Canadians or citizens. The group could be more than 5 people, but the minimum is 5 people who have to meet the requirements that are specified by Citizenship and Immigration Canada. The second group is known as community sponsors. Such communities could be unincorporated or incorporated, organizations. It could be faith-based communities. It could be ethnic-based communities. It could be, any other informal community that meets the specific requirement for sponsorship. Okay. Who can be part of a group of 5, or what are the eligibility requirements for a group of 5? Is, as I said, is any 5 or more Canadians above the age of 18 years and who live in the community where a refugee will be resettled. Okay, and those individuals have to undertake to provide or take care of the basic needs of the refugee that is to be resettled within their community. Those basic needs we are going to discuss later on. We'll be touching upon them later on. And the community that this group of 5 or community, the commitment they are making is for a period of 1 year. Who are ineligible or who is ineligible to be part of group of 5 actually be part of the sponsorship process. So whether you're talking about group of 5 or community sponsorship or even being participate under SAR as a constituent group, any individual who have been convicted inside or outside Canada for a serious criminal offense, any individual or group of people who are in default of court-ordered payments, support payments, if the person is subject to removal order, mean a permanent resident who, for some reason, the government of Canada is about to remove from Canada, or any person or individual who is subject to a proceeding, a revocation of the citizenship of the individual in order to have the person removed from Canada. Or if somebody or anyone who is detained in a jail, penitentiary, or reformatory. Next. Community sponsorships, CS. These are organizations. They act as guarantor for the necessary settlement support. So what do they have to do? They have to prove that they have the financial resources as well as human resources that is required to successfully resettle a refugee. So in this case, you have the necessary expertise, which involves counseling, which involves getting somebody to learn how to speak in English. It involves having to take somebody and show them how, Canadians do grocery shopping, Canadians open bank accounts, because believe it or not, in some countries, these things are not really considered by people. So a community sponsor assures the government of Canada or Citizenship and Immigration Canada that they have what it takes to look after and sponsor a refugee. We again emphasize that community sponsor may be an organization, for profit or not for profit. They can be an association, a corporation, incorporated or unincorporated. How can you help? Or how can others help you? So this is where we are, and this is, I believe, why we are here. How can you help? If you have refugees that you're thinking about sponsoring, then this is where you need to, ask questions or perhaps pay attention to understand how you can help. You can help by, getting together as a group, whether it is family or friends or co-workers, and in order to form a group of 5. When you form a group of 5, then you undertake the process of actually preparing something called a resettlement work plan. It is through that plan that you're going to detail and explain to CIC the process that you have considered what it takes to resettle a refugee. It is also through that work plan that you itemize who does what or who will do what. And so you're going to say what you have to offer and what you can afford to offer know and recognize your limits, as well as what are the liability issues when you sponsor a refugee, and understand the level of commitment that you can make or not make. So these are covered in other steps to follow. We mentioned like work plan, financial assessment, what is called refugee sponsor assessment, that needs to be completed. Upon completing that, the next step or the second part of that step will be information about refugees. Once you meet the requirement to be able to sponsor, then we go over to the refugee meeting their own requirement to be sponsored. Yes. Full responsibility cases. And I believe, again, this is directly about your interest here. Kelly mentioned earlier that they deal with groups that are interested in taking visa office referred refugees, called BVR. Here, this is not the same as that case. This is, you want to resettle a refugee, an individual, a family or group of refugees, and you have assessed and understood and that you'll be able to take care of their basic necessities, which are considered as housing, clothing, food, cash for transportation, allowance, and so forth and so on. This also includes moral support by trying to assist refugees through logistical arrangements. In this case, you start canvassing for apartment where the refugee will reside when they arrive, so that the moment they arrive, you go with them to show them those apartments. They'll then make a decision which one they feel that they want to lease based on the budget that you are going to walk them through that is required to have them resettled. That also includes, as we said, if you require interpretation or translation, having somebody available to translate for the refugee if they do not speak English or French. Then you are dealing with also what is called moral support cases. So moral support cases really is, again, if your group decides that even though you have the capacity to sponsor a refugee, you will also undertake a refugee that maybe Canadian government wants people to resettle, and Canadian government is willing to take care of the financial resources. All that is required is a group or family to provide moral support to these people and assist them to integrate into Canadian society. So this includes spiritual support, and also families or groups can do this jointly. So full financial responsibility, logistical to be able to assist pathway, or just simply moral. Move up. What do you have to provide? You have to provide housing, clothing, food, additional living expenses, which of course will involve communication or telephone, cell phone, or whatever, transportation, taking bus or bus passes, monthly bus passes, emotional, moral, and logistical help. Please, let's remember that when we are trying to help refugees, the underlying word is help. We want to help them reestablish. We want to help them stand on their feet. We are not to take over their life and manage their life for them, because if we do so, we are not doing them a favor, nor are we doing ourselves a favor, because at times we may get ourselves into a situation that really is not intended in the first place. Then, financial liability. So, you have decided you want to sponsor, and you want to know what it takes to sponsor. These numbers are what Citizenship and Immigration Canada have decided and give us a guideline. You want to sponsor one person, you must prove that you have $12,600. Two people, $21,200, and this has to be supported by document, bank statements, notice of assessment, and so forth and so on. Now, in some situations, CIC may insist that you open a bank account, which is a joint bank account in trust for the refugee that you are sponsoring, and then provide them the documentation in order for them to approve and allow you to proceed with the sponsorship. So you see the numbers, and I can tell you this from my experience. The refugees we're expecting, and some of them, you have a family of 9 or more in them. And this is why groups are important, because maybe 1 or 2 people may not be able to do this alone, but when you have yourself in groups or even multiple groups, you will be able to help these unfortunate fellow brothers and sisters. Sponsorship needs a team, and I believe that's why you're here. Already perhaps you have your team, or you're thinking about forming your team that you can work together in order to make it happen. So in the team, different people have different responsibility. Who is responsible for searching for apartments that are affordable? Who is responsible for receiving the refugee when they arrive at the airport? Who is responsible for calling the refugee, helping them to understand the form that needs to be filled, or even gathering the information from them to help them complete the forms? All these are part and parcel of, when a group deals with this, it becomes easy than when one person deals with it. So you need to gather your team, size up your financial resources, and be able to ensure that you're able to meet that requirement for 1 year sponsorship. If you're the person you are going to sponsor is a vulnerable person, police clearance is required from your group. Okay, each of you would have to provide a police clearance, which of course, depending upon what municipality, will cost maybe about $25 in order to obtain that. Okay, and that will be volunteers that will come into direct contact with the vulnerable refugee or children. Application process. Well, in this case, if you are at this stage, what you do is your group would have met, looked around, found out what is required in order to start the process. That is gathering your financial documents, your employment documents, being able to go to a bank and open a bank account in trust, joint, for the refugee, then access and obtain the sponsorship application package and begin to complete the sponsor, related forms, which Chris will address. So I will not dwell on that because Chris is going to address those in detail. So what, again, you can do is, in the group, all of you do not have to be able to, provide financial support. Your support could be moral support or in-kind support. What is in-kind support? Well, you want to help. You have a room or an apartment in your house. You want to offer that. That is called an in-kind support. But that in-kind support has a dollar value attached to it. So from the 12,600 CIC says you must meet, you can say that to rent that room or apartment per month, that will cost maybe $300 or $350 times 12. You've met a part of that budget. Then the rest of them are allocated accordingly. So that is called in-kind support. It could be by gathering, winter, clothing, and so forth and so on. Next. Application process. So, as we mentioned before, start with your own information, which you need to provide, gather together as a group, provide those on the form, provide it to the bank, and then provide it to CIC. Upon meeting the requirement, then the information from the refugee, which involved their full name, their date of birth, their address, country of citizenship or country of residence at this point, and when did they leave their country, how did they leave their country, what route did they take, and why did they leave their country. So, talk about, does somebody qualify? It is in why and what. When you address those questions, that you are now making a case for the person to qualify as a refugee. I left my country of residence because my city was bombarded, my house was demolished, and I just ran with my children and my wife. Okay, it has to be personalized. So the refugee has to make that case a personal. Even though it may apply to several people, it has to be personalized in order for that person to meet the requirement. So you gather all this information, then put them together. Once you have both your own application and that of the refugee completed, it used to be before that actually sponsors or group of 5 will complete their own part of the application here, then mailed that package with a CIC form to the refugee overseas. But there were challenges and difficulties and delay as a result. So what was found to be more efficient is for the group to collect the information from the refugee, collect the story from the refugee, and help them complete the form, send it back to them through email. They verify that it is correct. They then print and sign it and send it back so that you submit that at once, so in order to minimize or mitigate delays or refusal. Well, in order to prepare a solid and a successful application, CIC needs a work plan. A work plan, I believe, perhaps, I don't know, maybe Chris, or we can show that to you at the end of the presentation, is a step-by-step document, and it is also available on CIC website that walks you through the process. Who is responsible for this? Has it been done, or when will it be done? Step-by-step, itemized action plan that you need to assure CIC that you have considered them, you have delegated these responsibilities, and they are in good order. So some of the examples of what is included or considered are basically on the screen for you. Sometimes I have seen, as we continue at the moment, groups that actually form a group, they don't have the resources, they decide to do fundraising. Again, there has to be in that group who are the core people responsible for fundraising, and then tabulating everything. So this is the point where I would have to call on my colleague, Chris Daw, to come and walk you through the hands-on process that deals with the application forms. Thank you. Chris?
Thank you, Donald. Just as a bit of background in terms of, thanks, Owen. In terms of my expertise, I'm not going to consider myself a huge refugee expert in particular. I have, however, worked on thousands of permanent residence applications, and it's a challenging situation for people to go through when they're not familiar with filling out the applications and providing all the information. So what I'm going to be talking about are the most common reasons and problem areas that people have on the application forms themselves, and what the delays and the problems this could cause with any type of application. And of course, this is all tailored to the refugee process. So as Donald talked about, the sponsorship group in Canada has a variety of forms that need to be filled out. This is a screenshot right from the government's website, and you can find all of it right there, of course. The first thing I want to talk about is there's a document checklist. And the document checklist is for the entire application. It lists all of the forms that are on this page and other information as well, supporting documents. And one of the items on the checklist simply says, all forms and documents from the refugee family. So you have to read it very carefully, and you have to be serious about these things really being required. There's an application to sponsor form, which is filled out by the sponsors themselves, as well as a sponsor assessment form. The sponsor assessment form is the form that goes into all of those reasons why somebody might not be eligible to be sponsored that Donald had talked about earlier, people who've been convicted of things, or people who have proceedings against them, or unusual situations with immigration. There is a form to fill out for a settlement plan. You can see I've put a few different colored dots on there. The 2 red dots apply to people who are doing group of 5 sponsorships. The green dot is a combined of settlement plan and financial document for people who are doing community sponsors. So if you're doing a group of 5 sponsorship, you wouldn't provide the community sponsor plan, you'd provide the 2 red plans instead. The 3 orange dots at the bottom are optional forms that may be used in some situations depending on the individuals involved and that sort of thing. We'll talk about some of these later. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the number of forms that need to be filled out, and that, for example, that sponsor assessment form needs to be filled out by each member of a group of 5, not the group in entirety, but by each member. The refugee family also has forms that need to be filled out, and I'm going to be talking about these in more detail. These are going to be the more challenging ones for groups to make sure get completed accurately, dealing with distance and trying to help people who are in a marginal situation in terms of access sometimes to email or phone, and also you're trying to help people but you're not them. You don't know the answers to their questions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the form. So there's a generic form which would be filled out by the head of the family when we're talking about a family that's being sponsored. If that has room for, I believe, 5 dependent family members on it. And once you go beyond 5, you need to fill out a additional dependence form. So if you have, a married couple, there's going to be the head of the family, and then the spouse is going to be dependent number 1, and then each of the children will be a dependent. And then if you don't have enough space, you have to start filling out the additional dependent form. Schedule A, background declaration. This is the form that Canada uses to do background checks on all applications for permanent residence, whether they're applying under refugee or under economic class or family class. This form is filled out by all family members over the age of 18, and it's used to do background checks by RCMP, CSIS, and CBSA. Schedule 2 is filled out to detail the refugee situation. This is the form that Donald was just talking about when we're talking about making the case about why you're a refugee, why your situation, why you're being persecuted, why you need to resettle somewhere else, why you'll be successful resettling somewhere else. And then there's the use of representative form as well. We'll talk about the use of representative form at the end of the process as a special kind of aside. It could be filled out by both sponsors and applicants. And I put a little note on there myself to say it's also important to read the instruction guides. In terms of the refugee sponsorship as applying as a refugee, the sponsorship guide includes an appendix, which is a second checklist for the whole application. So for people who aren't familiar with how the Canadian government works on these types of things, there's checklists, and then one item on a checklist is information from guide IMM 6000. So you have to go then read that guide and find the checklist that's buried in that guide and make sure that you add all the information that checklist is looking for. The checklist within a checklist. I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, that it's easy to say, if you're just looking at the checklist for the sponsor, it says all the forms and documents for the refugee family. That's not like an open to interpretation, what you think's relevant kind of all the forms and documents. It means all the forms and documents listed at the back of this other guide. Does everybody here going to get a copy of these slides perhaps? Yeah? Okay, good. The first guide, when you're helping the family overseas fill out their portion of the documents, you have to be really, really sure that you're getting their honest answers. So if you're helping them fill this out on the phone, for example, you have to make sure that you're getting not what you think you should be telling them to fill out, but what their honest answers are. And you certainly cannot fill it out on their behalf without having consulted extensively with them and ask them to sign something that they don't really understand. Because people will sign that. I see it all the time. But ultimately, they're responsible for all their answers being accurate. And if their answers are inaccurate, it can really slow everything down or get them in huge trouble or get you in huge trouble. So it's very important that first of all, that you're sure of all the content that's going on to their application forms. And I understand that people are going to help, and that's what you're doing. It's why you're involved in this process. But it's important as a preface that the answers have to come from the applicants themselves. The most common reason that permanent residence applications get delayed or have issues is when we get into this background form. I'm going to be very technical because I'm a technical immigration person kind of by nature, and it's what I do. So bear with me if it's beyond what you're familiar with or where you are in the process yet. But this is a form that asks people to account for all of their time in the past 10 years, and you cannot leave any time out. And people commonly do. People don't want to admit to being unemployed. They don't want to admit to all kinds of things. So you cannot have this is just a quick sample I threw in for this type of topic. You cannot have one activity end and then there be several months before the next activity that's listed. You have to account for all your time. And when this happens, Immigration Canada will send applications back as incomplete, or they'll get bogged down in requests for additional information to clarify what happened. So you need to follow the instructions very closely here. And again, this is from my experience. I'm dealing with all types of permanent residence applications in my business, and almost every time that one of my clients brings me their first draft of their forms, this is wrong. Almost every single time there's something missing. Checklists are not suggestions. Checklists are things that are absolutely required. The documents for the group sponsors are required. Do not assume you'll be okay if you don't have everything on the list. If something is not possible, you have to explain that you don't have X because of Y. You don't want them to think you just forgot something. That's what they'll assume if something's missing, that you forgot it. So if there's some document that's actually not possible for some reason, be sure to provide a note explaining why that document is not possible. The visa officers and the immigration officers are human beings, and they're generally pretty understanding if you have a logical reason about why something's not available. A birth certificate for someone's not available, that place was bombed, we lost our records. Things like that have to be explained. You can't just leave them out and think that they'll understand. This is to do with the Refugee Schedule 2 form that Donald talked about earlier, about making the case that someone is a refugee. You can't just say, I'm from Syria, it's horrible there, of course I'm a refugee. You have to be personal, you have to be specific. You have to talk about what happened in your life with your family or in your neighborhood. You need to give dates. You need to give locations. And you definitely should not restrict yourself, or the refugees should not restrict themselves to the amount of space that's given on the application, which is like 2 lines. If the story is longer than 2 lines, which it probably is, attach a separate piece of paper and keep going. Give them the story. Make it true, make it honest, and be specific. Specific things like dates and locations and names really show that this is a real story. This is not just something that someone's pasted together, or that your refugee sponsor who doesn't even know you really has told you to say. This is something that's coming from you. This applies to all kinds of questions on the Schedule 2 form for refugees. It's a very, very open form. It's question and then 3 spaces. Question and 3 spaces. It's not a tick box kind of form. And the refugees are asked to provide a lot of detail, and they should. And it should be about themselves and their own family, not about general stuff. If there's a question that does not apply to somebody, you don't leave it blank. It needs to be marked with none or with not applicable. For example, common problems on applications, the background form that the families have to fill out asks if people have worked for the government, or if they've been in the military, or if they've been member of organizations like political parties or trade unions. People need to admit those things if they apply, but if they don't apply, they have to indicate none. They can't just leave it blank. The government will assume that you forgot to address the question, because actually in the instructions it says right there, and again, this is a really common problem. A lot of people don't do this. And it could lead to an application being considered to be incomplete and mailed back, or it could lead to follow-ups and delays. They also want to be very sure, and in situations like with what's going on now, whether somebody has been in the military or not, or whether they have been in certain groups. So they're not willing to take a blank form. They want to see either none or an answer. Another really common problem, it's not as common as it used to be, because word has spread out significantly in the last 10 years. A lot of people used to leave family members off thinking it would be faster or what have you. There are numerous opportunities in this application to list all family members of the family that's wishing to resettle in Canada. They need to take advantage to list all family members. This even includes people who aren't with them, who they can't find, who they don't know where they are. They might not even know if they're still alive, but declare them. Declaring opens options for the 1-year window for family members to join if they're able to be located 3 months after the original family arrived in Canada. If they were all declared on the form, now you have an opportunity to add those people to the file. If you didn't declare them, CIC is not going to believe they're actually your family members. They'll think something else has caused this to happen. So it's very, very important that the family lists everybody who is part of the family on the forms. Another area that people commonly get wrong, or this is a potential refusal area, is on the background declaration form, there's a whole series of tick boxes. Yes, no, have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? Most of them are really horrible things. Have you ever committed crimes against humanity, or have you ever committed acts of terror? But right in the middle of them is, have you ever been refused refugee status, an immigrant or permanent resident visa? So we're still talking about pretty big things. But at the bottom of it is, or a visitor visa to Canada or any country. So they might have might have applied to visit France 7 years ago. There's no harm in saying, yes, I was refused a visitor visa to France in 2002. But you have to make sure that they understand that. So if you become aware, for example, that the family you're working with has tried to go to other countries or has previously traveled to other countries, or make sure that the answer that they're giving is accurate. Because Canada is not trying to judge people on having had a previous visitor visa to another country refused. That's not really a problem. You just have to explain why. The issue, though, is if you hide things like that, then they can be refused. That could be a refusal just right there, because they lied on one of the admissibility questions on the application. And I've met a lot of people who had said no to those questions, and these are clients that I know in my office, and I say, but what about that student permit 2 years ago before you came to Canada the first time that got refused? Oh, I didn't think I had to declare that. Well, you have to. They're looking for files, the other things that they could look up if they had to. So it's not that people are being judged on having had previous refusals, but they need to be clear that whether they've happened or not, and that's a really common error. The form I talked about, where they have to account for all their time in the past 10 years, they also have to account for all their addresses in the last 10 years. Those two questions should look similar. If they're working in one city, they should probably be living in that city or a nearby city, or so they're going to look at the application. You can't look at the individual questions on these applications in isolation. The officer is going to be looking at the whole thing together. Do they make sense? It's quite possible that someone could work remotely. There's all kinds of reasons why you might have a conflict, but you need to recognize it and explain it. Declare assistance. Refugees are given a chance on the Schedule 2 form to say whether anybody or any organization helped them with their forms. They should do it because it's the honest thing to do is to answer yes if that happened, but it also makes, if the person doesn't speak English and the forms are completed in English, it will be assumed that somebody helped them, and it should be declared. There are also other opportunities to declare it on with the use of representative form as well, which we'll talk about at the end. But again, another area, just straight out, if they don't declare assistance and it's in a language they don't speak, Well, the officer is going to say, well, who helped you? Documents the answers on the application are also going to be compared not only to the other parts of the application, but also to all the documents that are provided, and it should make sense. A common issue that I see with people whose names are in Arabic is that they're not always translated consistently. It's not super common, but certain letters are K, sometimes it's a K, sometimes it's a KH. Again, you should use, for example, if the person has a passport, the application says use the name on your passport. If the birth certificate is slightly different, these are just things to have in mind, and common things that could lead to questions. And there's nothing wrong with questions per se, but what you don't want is delays, and questions equals delays. So if things don't look clear, you should explain it or explain which one is correct and which one isn't, that sort of thing. The refugees have to declare where they intend to live. This should be the same place that the sponsors live. As Donald mentioned, one of the eligibilities for sponsorship is that you're going to live in the community that they're going to settle into. And that's all great on the Canadian end, but when the family is filling out their forms, they need to understand that that's where they're going. If the group's in Kitchener, but they really want to live in Edmonton, that's something you need to talk about, and you can't just say, well, they're going to live, what they meant is to live in Kitchener for a year, then they'll move to Edmonton. Like, the intent has to be that they're going to live where there's support for them. Again, really common error. This is going to be less risky because people are dealing with email instead of the old days when we had paper applications being mailed around the world. The background declaration form has 3 places that could be signed. But only the one at the top is supposed to be signed when you file the application. The 2 with the X's, one's for an interpreter, and one is for somebody who's being interviewed in person. And then they're asked to sign again. So a common source of delay is just signing in the wrong spot. And you get hard copy forms, and you waited 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks for them to get there. And now they're signed in the wrong place, and you can't use them. So everything that you can do to help in terms of even showing people where to sign things is important. Don't take things for granted, especially for people who aren't speaking English well. Use of a representative. This is a 2-page optional form that can be filled out by sponsors or by applicants, and it's to declare assistance with the application or representing somebody and wanting to be able to speak on their behalf. Now, Eileen and Donald and I, when we represent clients for immigration processes, we are named on these forms that allow us to speak to the government on their behalf and file information. But a sponsor can also be an unpaid representative for the refugee family. You could also put down, you could list, there are sections to list both unpaid and paid representatives. When you're talking about a paid representative, they have to be licensed. But if you're talking about an unpaid representative, it could be a family friend, it could be a sponsor, it could be a community group. If you want someone to be able to assist and speak on behalf of the refugee family in terms of in writing, not obviously at an interview, then you can name somebody from the group. Alternatively, I think what we're going to do, I'll just mention it now, that Eileen and I are going to be offering some community assistance for vetting application forms and helping people make sure their things are complete. We could be named as unpaid representatives on forms like that as well. But this is a form that if somebody has given you advice and told you what to do on a personal level for an application, it really should be filled out so that person is both accountable for what they told you and also so that the government's aware of assistance. So the processing times, actually, before I do that, I wanted to mention, just before I came up, Eileen had given me some documents that are really, really good. So beyond what I've talked about, there is a guide. It's from the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program. And it is, where's the URL on this? Thanks, Donald. RSTP, Refugee Sponsorship Training Program, rstp.ca. And they have a multi-chapter guide to helping people who are not in the business of immigration like we are in filling applications and the common problems as well. So I'd highly recommend that if you are going to be doing any type of refugee sponsorship, that you look into this information as well and really make sure, because everybody wants to help, but what we don't want is it to take forever and not get anywhere, and we would really hate to somehow get the family we're trying to help in trouble because we've misled something. So it's important to be accurate and be complete, and then your help can mean the most that it can. So I think I'm going to leave that for mine, and I think Eileen's going to come back up. Talk about the processing times.
Processing times.
Yes.
I don't know what the processing time. Okay, the RSTP is listed later on in the presentation. There are a few hyperlinks that we've posted, and as we said earlier, we'll be distributing this complete slide deck through MCC as soon as I can get it over to Kaylee. Currently, the processing times, I believe, are anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks. Is that correct, Donald?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so once... Right. So due to the expedition of this process, once the entire application, your forms, the refugee members' forms, all the supporting documentation, once that entire package has been received at the Winnipeg CPO office, they will take anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, hopefully closer to 4 weeks to process. From that point on, it's just a waiting game. So during that time, you know, it says here ranges from 6 to 65 months. Those are the old timelines. Hopefully we won't be waiting 65 months.
Actually, it is still the processing time. Outside the other people.
Okay, so Donald is just adding here. So aside from the three Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey, other than those 3 refugee countries, the timeline ranges are still up to 65 months, which really is horrendous when you think about it. Okay, so now we're at the point where, in the future, everything has been lined up. You know that your refugee family has been interviewed. You know that they have their visas. They're ready to get on that plane. And apparently there's a plane coming in a week. The first plane with, they're arriving, where are they arriving? Toronto. Wow, there are going to be a lot of people at Toronto Airport that day. Do not avoid the airport that day. Okay, so now what? You have to put your resource plan into action. This is where you have to know who's picking them up from the airport, who's going to take them to their apartment, who's going to take them to the bank the next day, who's going to make sure they have their cell phone, who's going to make sure that there's an interpreter if you need one. There are many things that you have to line up. Now, when you go from putting your team together to this point in time where they are arriving, sometimes your plan doesn't work out. Sometimes you have volunteers and friends and neighbors with all the best intentions, and when push comes to shove and they have to actually take on that task and that role, they can't do it or they can't make it for whatever reason. Make sure you have your own plan B. Okay, make sure that you have to always, this is why they call it a team, because you have to continually communicate, make sure everyone knows what they have committed to on a realistic level, and they can follow through. One of the issues that we spoke about as a group before doing this presentation was, yes, we can put together an entire apartment together. Yes, we can complete it with everything, all the furnishings. We can give them more winter clothing than most families. If we put all our friends together, we can overstuff their closets. But we don't want to do that. We want to give them the base level, because if we give them the expectation that is so incredibly high, that is what they will understand as their level of living. And they will not be able to maintain that after a year. What we want to do is come down to a nice, realistic level and make sure that they have that sense of permanence, give them a home, make sure it is their home, they feel safe, and encourage them to find their own independence. Okay, so just talking a little bit about the federal government and the news. As everyone knows, they've promised 10,000 to arrive before the end of the year and another 15,000 by the end of February. I just heard on the news when I was parking my car that it looks like by the end of next year there'll be 50 or 60,000. And that is because of groups like this here coming together and creating their own private sponsorships. So this is fantastic that you're here, and it's fantastic that MCC is putting this together and that this message will go out to more people. The more people understand and know what they can do and how to get through those steps, the more independent we are, that we can provide our help. The Globe and Mail, I saw an article in the Globe and Mail this weekend about people going through the interview process. And there was one woman who was overjoyed because they were getting their visas, and then there was another woman who was completely distraught because there was an error in her application form. So as Chris mentioned, Chris and I, we are here in the KW area. We will be offering our help to you, to your families, reviewing your application forms, making sure that they are correct and complete before you submit. We can talk about that later, and we'll give you our contact information. This I picked up from CBC News just yesterday. It shows how many communities, large and small, across Canada are really taking part in this. And as you can see, they're all over the place, even in places where I would not even think of going. Well, maybe. So Canada's really getting involved, and Quebec, sorry? Oh yeah, Quebec has a different process, which is probably why there aren't a lot. The dot is very small in Quebec. Okay, so we'd like to open the floor to some questions. Sure. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. And you can stay up here for the questions.
I'll take all the questions. Great. Bad time to walk back up. I also meant to mention a few things about the actual application itself, that in the logistics of submitting it is that it's submitted like on paper to the office in Winnipeg. There is no government fee to process these applications, and it's highly, highly recommended that you send it by courier that you can track. I don't think that CIC has ever actually lost one of my clients' applications, but there have been numerous times where they were missing for long periods of time before they were found. And it was only because I had a courier slip that somebody had signed for that they actually took it seriously and looking for it. So I would highly recommend that you keep copies of everything and that it be sent by courier and that you get a signature for it. That was really my... Yeah, that was the only other caveat I meant about the logistics of actually filing the application. You can take all the questions.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Eileen. Just a few more things I want to point out to you. In Canada, once any person attains the age of 18, they are considered as an adult. Likewise, in this application process, it is the same. So we found in Jordan families who would like to come together, but out of the 9, 2 or 3 are now above the age of 18. The parents want them to be included. We tell them sure. However, they have to have their own independent applications. So we still have to have them linked but they have to be independent applications. So when you are working with the refugees, please ensure the first question is, do you have any family member above the age of 18 under your dependent? Okay? And if there is, then that person have to complete the set of application that Chris discussed, generic form, Schedule A, Schedule 2, and so forth and so on, and answer those questions. Now, in this case, if their story is the same with that of their parent, they can say, see the story of Mr. So and so. They can, put the same thing, but they have to have their own independent application. So it is important that we bear that in mind as we are helping people. That's the only major thing I just wanted to add. Thank you. Now, if you have I'm sure you must have any question. If you have questions, this is the time to take your questions. Yes, please.
Aileen or Chris, working with some Syrians that speak Arabic. Do you speak Arabic?
No, I don't. Aileen. So the question is whether Aileen and Chris speak Arabic, and a member here, a gentleman here asked that question because already he's involved with a Syrian family that speaks Arabic. Now, this is one of the requirements. So the question then is, you need a help in finding somebody who speaks Arabic. Within this group that is sitting here, does anybody speak Arabic? There you go. So now, you see, this help is cross-help, to cross-network. That's how you connect and begin to make that connections. I was in Jordan to interview refugees. I didn't speak Arabic. I don't understand Arabic. But luckily enough, within the refugees I interviewed, one young chap, 19 years old, speaks perfect English. So guess what? After interviewing him, I used him as an interpreter for the rest of the period I was there. The funny thing, though, is the way he spoke English. I just, he says, I just finished my high school. I wanted to go to university when this war broke out and our place got destroyed, and he was really upset, which justifiably so. I said, okay, so he just finished high school but speaks perfect English. So I asked, how did you learn English? Were you taught English in school? He looked at me and smiled. And then he says, no. Then I was just puzzled. I said, then how? He says, just watching American movies. Well, that amazed me, By watching movies, he was able to speak that level of English. So anyway, any other questions? I wish I could speak Arabic. I should have to watch Arabic movies to see if I can. Any more questions? Yes, please. Well, yes. Now also, the question is, one of the conditions is on the G5 presentation is that you have to know the family, the refugee family. Yes and no, because some group of 5 actually do not know anybody, do not know any refugee, but they just wanted to arise and help. So those group of 5, how do they proceed? They proceed by contacting CIC to be matched as long as they have met the requirement. So that's one way. Now, if you are naming a refugee and you want to sponsor that refugee, then you better know the refugee. So that is one of the criteria there. If you name somebody, then you have to know the refugee, or somebody in your group knows the refugee. Sure. Yes. Yeah, there is a link, and I guess we can find that link. I don't believe we included it, or maybe Eileen, due to her resourcefulness, just searched it out and included it. There is a link that you can go to make a request, to be given a profile. But Usually, the best way to go about that is through a SAR who have that access to profiles, for people to be matched with refugee if you do not have somebody already. A SAR, like MCC, Kelly, you have to contact Kelly to.
I want to just jump in quickly.
Yes.
Just to jump in again, just to talk about the main reason that people would do a group of 5 as opposed to the other refugee sponsorship options. If you just want to help in general, as opposed to helping a specific family, that's where the sponsorship agreement holders like MCC, and you hear about Lifeline Syria and all kinds of other organizations, they're sponsoring the people who are deemed to be in the most need. But if you know somebody yourself who's being affected, it's a needle in a haystack for them to be filtered through the system to be one of the people who's picked as ones who have the most need. So the group of 5 is for people in the community who know people there, who are connected to people there, who want to help specific families. So that's usually what the group of 5 is used for. It does work best when you know them, and it's also, you would choose that angle because you want to be able to select someone that you know. There are other angles to select people who are in most need.
Okay, there was a hand. Yes.
Okay. I'm individual, I just want to sponsor. And I don't have anybody group of 5 that I know. All the requirements such as, for example, you say sponsor 1 person, you have to have 4,000 and that. If I fulfill all the requirements that group of 5 has, that individual gets sponsorship.
Individual sponsorship, again, is different. To do an individual sponsorship, you have to take a different process. You would have to either find a constituent group, and constituent groups function through sponsorship agreement holders like MCC, but MCC capacity is already they're overwhelmed at this point. So, okay. All right. So this gentleman says that he feels he meets the requirement financially and otherwise, but does not have a group. And by the way, a group, you could, ask some of your friends, or even if you have family members, that's how you can form a group. Or if you, your religious group or community, you can approach them and talk to them. They can assist you in forming a group as long as you have what it takes to be able to sponsor. You just explain to them, I have the financial, I'll be willing to do the translation and whatever. All I need is that moral support to get my application through the process. So that's another way. Okay. Any other questions? Sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. That's what happens when there's only one microphone. Just push him off the podium. No, just stay here, please. I just wanted to mention for your question, the reason why I met Kaylee and the reason why we're here is because I am part of a group of 5. Well, group of 5 is really, it's a minimum. It's not really a group of 5. We're more like 12. Yeah. We're 5 or 6 families. We've come together. We know that we can raise the funds. In fact, as soon as we opened up a registry, it's no longer called a registry, but once we did that and we raised our funds in 5 days. So we knew that we had the funds. We put our team together. We made commitments of all the different roles and responsibilities. And after we had all that, then we came to MCC. And that is why we were able to get through it very quickly. So if you can get your teams together and then approach an SAH, you're almost guaranteed you will be linked up with them quickly. It's when you go there and you say, I'm looking for someone to link up with, that it's not SAH / Facebook, right? They're not going to hook you up just because you show up. You have to have your own team, okay?
Thank you, Eileen. Yes, please.
I was going to ask about the police clearances. I just went through this permanent residence process myself.
Yes.
It was really very difficult. Is there going to be a similar kind of process for refugees? Or with the expedited process, is it not so necessary?
Any immigrant that wishes to enter into Canada have to provide clearance. Now, for refugees, the process is slightly different because CCs and CBSA are already on the ground to do the the clearance, security checks. Okay, that's the reason why, even though as you went through the process, you understood what Chris was explaining in Schedule A, background declaration. With all those information, they use it to try and do security checks, okay, and security clearance. Refugees cannot because, one, they are outside their place of citizenship or habitual residence. There is war there. Who are they going to ask to give them the police report? So in this case, it reverts to UNCR and, in this case, Canadian authorities on the ground to collect the necessary information and begin to do the screening that relates to security. That's the process. Okay. Thank you. Any other question? Yes, please. If a family member, you're talking about a dependent that is now married, okay, but they live on the same place, the same house. All right. So in this case, this falls under what is called a de facto, okay, family member. The person, because the person is above the age of 18, the person have to complete their own application, and the family that they are with. Now, the question I have for you is, this person is married. Is this person living with a spouse?
Yeah, he's living with the spouse and also
with a family? Yeah, okay. So extended family basically is what it is. Because they are living together, yes, the child who, is living with a husband and her parent or his parent, can request, or the parents can request for the application to be linked. Now, when it is linked, depending upon the size of the family, what is going to happen is you have to find a big group to be able to resettle them, depending upon the number of the family. But if it's basically a family that is maybe a family of 4, then sponsorship may be much, much easier. But a large family, it will be a little bit more, challenging to find sponsors. So that is called linked sponsorship. When you are linking a sponsorship, what happens here is that the group or the constituent group would have to actually is undertaking that they are willing to sponsor this family and they are willing to sponsor this dependent child who is linked to this, and they have to be, named in the undertakings for the family and for that dependent child. Well, it's no longer a dependent child based on Canadian law, but because of the refugee situation, CIC app allows that, the linkage.
Okay. I have a question for
you.
Yes. I think I have a question for Donald. When we're naming de facto family members on a Schedule 2 application for the refugee family,
yes.
My understanding is that you have to be able to kind of make the case of why these people should be treated as part of your family unit for this application if they're not, your children under 18 or your spouse. How challenging is that, in your experience, from CIC to accept certain people as being de facto family members to be included together? If I can put you on the spot with a tough question.
Thank you, Chris. De facto family member, as we know it under HENC, that's still the principle that is actually, running and applying here. In this case, and this is most frequent in refugee situation, especially if the family member is a female that is above the age of 18, 19, 20, even up to 22. CIC will agree, because of the cultural background of the place the person is coming from, would agree for that family member to be linked to the, still you complete your own generic and all those things, but linked to be resettled together. So that linkage is that they have to be resettled all together. Okay, so de facto, as we then say, is if it's somebody that have resided in the same household, that's why I asked, is this family member that is married, having a spouse, are they living in the same family with the parents? If the answer is yes, and they have all been so doing for quite some time, and she is a female, they were going to consider about emotional support, all those sort of things. No longer only financial support in order to have them linked to be resettled all together. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Is there a website or one or two websites that are in essence capturing much of the information that you gave us today that we could go to that and then follow up ourselves? Because there was even scribbling like mad.
Yes. Eileen mentioned RSTP, which is rstp.ca, and then there is also CIC, which is Citizenship and Immigration Canada website, which is cic.gc.ca. Both websites are rich in terms of resources. Now, for people who are interested in sponsoring, the easiest website to go to is RSTP, because that is meant to give you information step by step what you need to do and what is required of you as a sponsor. From a CIC website, you will get a link which of course tells you that you need to go to a SAR in order to access a profile if you do not have a refugee and you want to sponsor. But Chris and Eileen mentioned before that if you really do not have a refugee and you wish to help and you want to participate in this process, if you do not want to actually have the refugee and assist them directly, you may make contribution to groups like sponsorship agreement holders, which MCC is one of them, who would then use that funds to ensure that another family is sponsored by a group that are willing to do something but do not have, or whatever the case is. So they are all there. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
My understanding is that you're going to send these slides.
Yes. Yes. Kelly will be sending the slides to you. Okay, Kelly?
Thank you. Thank you very much. One more question?
There's a multicultural center up there. I can't remember who it is, but if there's people that are looking to organize a group of 5 or have someone they're trying to bring in from someone they know in Syria, there's someone associated with the multicultural center that's organizing that. Maybe someone in this room knows who that is. It's a lady. She's a consultant, and she's coordinating people that are looking to sponsor and looking to be sponsored. But contact the multicultural center to get that information. I don't know. Just know that.
So that comment was that there are, if you are looking to be connected with a group of 5 in the area, please connect with KW Multicultural Center. You can Google them. Their website is there. Talk to their, on this resource slide, you'll also see that, and they'll be able to get you connected. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Chris, Donald, and Eileen for being here with us today. Thank you all for participating. I hope that this information was helpful. So next steps moving forward, I have a sign-up sheet here, so please put your name and email if you would like to receive these slides, as well as the audio recording that will be linked with the slides. Second, if you are going to proceed with a named sponsorship and would like support in reviewing documentation, connect with Eileen and with Chris, who will be willing to assist you in that. So connect with them directly. And if you are interested in proceeding with a sponsorship of a person who you don't know and you would be interested in learning more about the Blended Visa Office Referral Program, feel free to connect with me. MCC would love to support you, and thank you all again for being here today. Have a great day.